Am I the idiot for refusing to help my parents financially after they made me sleep in the garage for 8 months while I was in college? Throwaway, because my sister knows my main account and I don't need the extra drama right now. I, male 31, have always been the second favorite child in my family. Like, it wasn't even subtle growing up. My older sister Vanessa, female 36, was always the golden child to my parents. Charles, male 62, and Kathy, female 60. And I'm not exaggerating when I say always. We grew up in an average suburban neighborhood. Dad worked as a mid-level manager at some manufacturing company for like 30 years, and Mom worked part-time at a gift shop in the mall. From as early as I can remember, Vanessa got everything. When she turned 18, my parents bought her a car. Not a brand new BMW or anything, but still a decent used Honda that probably cost them $8. When I turned 18, I got a watch. A nice watch, I guess, but definitely not equivalent to a freaking car. The really obvious stuff started with college, though. Vanessa had her entire college paid for, every cent. Meanwhile, I had to work 2 jobs while taking a full course load in computer science, which isn't exactly an easy major, and still ended up with about $40 in student loans that took me years to pay off. My parents' contribution to my education was letting me live at home, at least initially. Oh, and Vanessa. She got married young to this guy Trevor, had 3 kids, now 12, 10, and 8, but he cheated on her about 8 years ago and they got divorced. This is where everything really went bad for me. I was 23 and in my final year of college, still living at home to save money. One day, Vanessa shows up with all 3 kids and a bunch of suitcases, crying about how Trevor was having an affair and she needed to move back home. I felt bad for her. I really did. I'm not a monster. That evening after dinner, my parents told me they needed to talk about room arrangements. They took me to the garage, not some converted, insulated living space, just the regular old garage where they parked the cars and kept the lawnmower. They had set up a twin bed, small dresser, and space heater in the corner and told me this would be my new room. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but my mom said it was only temporary until Vanessa got back on her feet. I pointed out the garage wasn't insulated, had concrete floors, no bathroom, and it was October in the Midwest, where it gets cold as hell. My mom dismissed my concerns, saying I could handle a little discomfort since I was an adult and that the kids needed stability. When I suggested maybe Vanessa could sleep on the pull-out couch instead, my dad got angry. My parents said I wasn't being supportive of family during a crisis and that family sacrifices for each other. When I asked how long this would last, they gave vague answers about reassessing in a few months. A few months turned into 8 months through a Midwest winter, with a space heater that barely kept the temperature above freezing. There were mornings I could see my breath. I had to knock on the door to use the bathroom, and sometimes Vanessa would take forever, getting her kids ready in the morning, making me late for class or work. I mean, there were times I literally couldn't get into the house to use the bathroom at night because they'd be asleep and wouldn't hear me knocking. I had to. Okay, this is gross, but I sometimes had to pee in a bucket and empty it the next day. Although I could usually get in to use the bathroom, just sometimes it was an issue. I got sick constantly that winter. I developed back problems from that shitty twin bed that I still deal with. I was depressed and felt completely worthless. My grades actually dropped that semester because it's kind of hard to study when your fingers are too cold to type. I finally scraped together enough for a security deposit on a tiny apartment with 3 roommates and moved out. My parents barely acknowledged it. Mom just said, "Well, if that's what you want," like I was being difficult. Fast forward to now, I've worked my ass off for 8 years, building a decent career as a software developer. I'm not rich or anything, but I finally paid off all my student loans last year and have a modest emergency fund. I've got a nice 1-bedroom apartment, a cat named Edison who's basically my child, and I go hiking on weekends to help with stress. Things are stable, finally. Then last weekend, my parents showed up at my door completely unannounced. I haven't cut them off or anything, but we're definitely not close. I see them at holidays, occasional family dinners, that's about it. I opened the door and they both looked like shit. Disheveled, tired, anxious. Dad immediately asked if they could come in to discuss something important. I reluctantly let them in and offered them water, which they didn't want. Mom started crying almost immediately, while Dad explained he'd lost his job due to company downsizing. Apparently, they're 4 months behind on mortgage payments. Then Mom told me they needed $12,000 to catch up and avoid foreclosure. I just sat there for a minute, trying to process it. I asked why they hadn't prepared better when Dad was so close to retirement age anyway. Dad got defensive, saying they'd had unexpected expenses, which I later found out included helping Vanessa with her mortgage multiple times. Then Mom said something that really upset me. She said, "After all we've done for you, you owe us this." All they'd done for me. Like making me sleep in a freezing garage while Vanessa got my room. Like making me work multiple jobs through college while paying every cent for Vanessa. I lost it. I brought up the garage. I brought up college. I brought up years of favoritism. Dad dismissed it as ancient history and said it wasn't as bad as you remember. It was exactly as bad as I remember. Mom called me dramatic and said they always treated you kids equally, which is such bullshit. I almost laughed. I asked why they weren't asking Vanessa for help. They admitted they hadn't even asked her because she has the kids to support. As if her 3 kids are more important than me being homeless for the better part of a year. I saw red. I told them I wouldn't give them a penny. I told them they had failed me as parents when I needed them, and now they wanted me to bail them out. Hell no. I basically escorted them to the door while they were still pleading and slammed it in their faces. I'm not proud of that part, but I was just so angry. Since then, my phone has been blowing up. Vanessa has sent like 30 texts calling me heartless, selfish, a terrible son, etc. My parents have left tearful voicemails saying they're going to lose their home. Even some aunts and uncles who I barely talk to have reached out telling me I need to step up for family. The thing is, I could probably afford to help them. Not the full $12 without emptying my savings, but I could contribute something. But every time I think about doing it, I remember shivering in that garage while they fussed over Vanessa and her kids in my room. Am I being petty? Maybe. But it feels like, if I cave now, I'm just continuing the pattern where Vanessa gets everything and I get the scraps. So Reddit, am I the idiot for refusing to help my parents financially after how they treated me? Edit, holy crap, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the supportive comments. To clarify a few things people are asking about. 1. No, I don't know the full details of their financial situation or why they're so behind. My dad had been at that company for almost 30 years, so I assume he got some kind of severance, but who knows how they spent it. 2. Yes, Vanessa does have a job. She works as an administrative assistant or something. I don't know her exact financial situation, but she's not destitute or anything. 3. To everyone asking why I didn't just move out right away. I was 23, but I was also a full-time student working 2 part-time jobs. The housing market in our area is expensive, and I literally couldn't afford to move until I had saved enough for security deposit plus first month's rent. Trust me, I got out as soon as I possibly could. 4. For those suggesting I help with conditions attached, I honestly don't think they'd follow through on any conditions I set. They've shown they don't respect me or my boundaries. Now for the first update. First of all, thank you all so much for the overwhelming support on my last post. So it's been about a week since I slammed the door in my parents' faces. Still not my proudest moment, but whatever, and things have gotten really bad. Vanessa has contacted every aunt, uncle, and cousin we have. People I haven't talked to in years are suddenly blowing up my phone with messages about how I'm abandoning family in their time of need and how I always were the difficult one. That's a direct quote from Uncle Steve, who I'm pretty sure wouldn't recognize me if we passed on the street. The weirdest part about all this is that my mom's younger sister, Aunt Holly, actually reached out to support me. I was honestly shocked because Holly has always been kind of the black sheep of the family herself. She got divorced in the 90s, and the family was super Catholic and weird about it. She told me stuff I never knew. Apparently, my parents took out a second mortgage on their house 5 years ago to help Vanessa buy a condo. A freaking condo. And then Vanessa lost it in foreclosure like a year later because she decided to quit her stable job to pursue her passion for making jewelry or whatever. I wish I was making this up. Holly also told me that my grandparents had set up a college fund for me that was supposed to have like $40 in it by the time I started school. Guess what happened to that money? My parents borrowed most of it to pay for Vanessa's wedding to Trevor. You know, the guy who cheated on her after like 5 years. So while I was working 2 jobs and taking out loans, there was supposed to be money for me that they just took. I was so angry after talking to Holly that I called my parents' mortgage company pretending to be my dad to get information about their account. I know, not my finest moment, but I was just so frustrated with all the lies. Turns out they're not 4 months behind like they claimed. They're 7 months behind, and they need closer to $20,000, not $12,000. They lied about that too, so I called my cousin Ryan, who lives in the same town as my parents. Ryan's always been straight with me. He confirmed their financial situation is totally screwed, but also told me my parents have been giving Vanessa at least $1,500 a month for expenses, despite her having a decent job. For years. That's over $18 a year they've been giving her while they're drowning in debt themselves. I was so mad, I finally called my dad directly. He answered and immediately asked if I'd reconsidered helping the family. I tried to stay calm and asked him to explain their actual financial situation. He hesitated for a long time before finally admitting, yeah, they needed more than the $12 they originally mentioned. When I asked about the money they give to Vanessa every month, he got all defensive, saying Vanessa has special circumstances with the kids. I pointed out that Trevor should be paying child support, and Dad reluctantly admitted Trevor rarely pays the full amount. When I asked why they haven't pursued enforcement of the child support through the courts, he made excuses about it being complicated and not wanting to rock the boat. When I brought up the second mortgage for Vanessa's condo, he got really quiet and then accused me of spying on them and turning family against family. Then I asked about my college fund that grandparents set up, and he claimed it was a joint decision with your grandparents, which I know is complete BS, because Holly said Grandma and Grandpa were furious when they found out, but it was too late by then. I asked why they never told me about any of this before I took out all those student loans, and he got angry and said I was always jealous of the special bond Vanessa has with them. He hung up on me after I suggested maybe Vanessa should be the one helping them financially this time. I've been talking to my therapist about all this, been seeing her for like 3 years to deal with my family issues. Shocking, I know. She says I'm being manipulated and need to maintain firm boundaries. Easier said than done when your brain is programmed to feel guilty about everything. 2 days after the call with my dad, my mom sent this long email trying to rewrite history. She claimed they only made me sleep in the garage for a few weeks and that it was perfectly comfortable with all the amenities you needed. I'm not kidding. She actually wrote that. I still have photos from that time showing the nasty twin bed with the space heater that barely worked and the freaking bucket I sometimes had to pee in. But sure, Mom, all the amenities. And then, oh my God, you guys. Yesterday, Vanessa showed up at my apartment completely unannounced. I opened the door and she was standing there looking almost humble, which should have been my first clue something was off because Vanessa doesn't do humble. I reluctantly let her in, and the second the door closed behind her, her whole demeanor changed. She immediately started listing all the ways I was destroying the family with my selfishness. And every time I tried to speak, she just talked over me. I finally had to raise my voice to ask why she wasn't helping our parents financially. She claimed she couldn't possibly because of the children's expenses. I pointed out that she has a full-time job and lives rent-free in Mom and Dad's rental property. She just waved that off, saying, they want to help me. That's what parents do. When I asked if she remembered me living in the garage while she took my room, she said it was not a big deal, and I was being dramatic as usual. I showed her the photos from my phone of the garage setup, and she barely looked at them before saying, looks cozy compared to what Mom and Dad will face if they're homeless. I finally asked her to leave, and she refused, saying we needed to resolve this. I had to threaten to call building security before she would go. As she was leaving, she said this isn't over in this weird, ominous tone. So now I'm at a crossroads. My parents' situation has gotten worse. They've received an eviction notice, giving them 30 days to leave if they don't pay what they owe. And the thing is, I actually do have enough in savings to help them. Not the full $20, but I could probably do $5 without completely emptying my emergency fund. But I feel like if I just give them money, nothing changes. They'll keep supporting Vanessa, she'll keep taking advantage, and they'll be in the exact same situation in another year or two. I'm considering offering to help them on the condition that they agree to family counseling and complete financial transparency, including cutting off the monthly payments to Vanessa. But part of me wonders if even doing that makes me weak after how they've treated me for my entire life. I'm just so tired of all of this. Like, I finally got to a stable place in my life after working my ass off for years, and now I'm being pulled back into their problems. I haven't slept properly in days, I'm falling behind at work, and I'm just exhausted. Edit. To those asking why Vanessa can't help, apparently her jewelry business failed and she went back to her admin job, but claims she can barely make ends meet despite living rent-free. She drives a newer car than I do, though, so take that how you will. Someone asked about Trevor's child support. From what I understand, he's supposed to pay about $1,200 per month, but often only pays a fraction of that. My parents have apparently been making up the difference rather than pushing Vanessa to take him back to court, because of course they have. Now for the second update. So it's been almost 2 months since my last post. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who commented with support and advice. A lot has happened. I've been putting off this update because I wanted to wait until things settled down before writing everything out. Also, I've been super busy at work, got promoted to senior developer last month. Yay me, I guess. Which has been like the one bright spot in this whole family mess. Oh, and I started seeing someone too, Lauren, who I met at this programming conference back in March. She's really cool and hasn't run away after hearing about my family drama, yet lol. Anyway, after my last post, I spent a lot of time talking with my therapist about what to do. I was seriously losing sleep over this whole situation, and it was starting to affect my work and my mental health. I kept going back and forth between, they're still my parents, and, but they treated me like absolute garbage. I finally decided on a compromise. I would help them with $5,000. Not the full $20,000 they needed, but still a significant amount for me. But with conditions. They would need to agree to family counseling and provide complete transparency about their finances going forward. I wrote a detailed email explaining my offer and why I was setting these conditions. I spent hours on it, trying to be firm but not cruel. Sent it and then basically had anxiety for 3 days waiting for their response. When my dad finally replied, guys, I can't even. His email basically said my offer was insulting and not enough to make a difference anyway. He accused me of using their misfortune to control them and said that real family helps without conditions. I read that email like 5 times, thinking maybe I was misunderstanding something. But nope. They would rather lose their house than go to counseling with me or be transparent about their finances. Like, what? Honestly, it hurt. A lot. But in a weird way, it also gave me clarity. This response proved that I was making the right decision by setting boundaries. About a week later, my Aunt Holly called to tell me my parents had officially lost their house and were moving into a small 2-bedroom apartment. Apparently, they had finally asked Vanessa for financial help as a last resort, but she also refused, claiming she couldn't possibly contribute while raising 3 kids on her own. Here's where it gets interesting, though. According to Holly, my parents then asked Vanessa and her kids to move out of their rental property where she had been living rent-free for years. They needed to charge actual market rent to a tenant to help with their own housing costs. And Vanessa lost her mind. She got mad at them about how they were abandoning her and the children after everything she's been through. You know, the divorce from 8 years ago that she's still milking. Then Vanessa did something I never expected. She reached out to me directly, trying to form some kind of alliance against our parents. She called me one night like we were suddenly best friends, saying we need to stick together against Mom and Dad's crazy behavior. I was just like, are you kidding me right now? After everything, I basically told her I wasn't interested in forming any kind of alliance with her against anyone. She hung up on me, so for about 3 weeks, things were quiet. I was starting to think maybe this whole nightmare was finally over. I was wrong. About 3 weeks ago, I heard desperate knocking on my door around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I checked the peephole and saw both my parents standing there. Mom was crying while Dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. I reluctantly opened the door, like an idiot, and they immediately started apologizing for any misunderstandings from the past. Dad told me they were now facing homelessness because they had nowhere to go. Mom said they had been sleeping in their car for 2 nights already. I asked about the apartment Holly had mentioned they were moving into, and Dad explained they couldn't afford the security deposit plus first month's rent. They said they needed $3,000 just to get a roof over their heads. I asked if they had spoken to Vanessa about staying with her temporarily. Mom admitted Vanessa had refused to take them in, saying her new place was too small for extra people, but apparently not too small for her to ask for their help constantly for years. And then, oh my freaking God, you guys, Dad literally got down on his knees in my hallway. Mom joined him a second later, both of them crying and promising they would make it up to me. I just stood there frozen. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced. I felt this really strange mix of satisfaction and pity seeing them like that. After what felt like forever, I said, "Now you know how I felt in that garage." I told them I would think about it and closed the door as they continued pleading. I sat in my apartment for hours after they left, totally conflicted. Part of me wanted to help them just because seeing them like that was so awful. But the next morning, I called my dad and told him I wasn't going to help them. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I realized they still hadn't actually acknowledged or apologized for how they treated me. They were just desperate. And then something unexpected happened. My dad finally admitted that yes, they had always favored Vanessa. He said it wasn't because they loved her more, but because she was needier, and they felt she couldn't survive without their help. Meanwhile, they always saw me as stronger and more self-sufficient. Like, is that supposed to make me feel better? We treated you worse because you weren't a complete disaster like your sister. How is that a compliment? While it was kind of validating to finally hear him admit the favoritism, it came way too late and without any real remorse. It was just another attempt to manipulate me. So what happened to them? Well, they ended up selling most of their possessions and moving into a subsidized senior living apartment complex. It's a major downgrade from the family home they lived in for over 30 years, but at least they're not homeless. Vanessa, faced with having to pay actual rent for the first time in years, had to take on a second job and move to a smaller apartment with her kids. She's been telling everyone who will listen that I destroyed the family. Everything finally came to a head last weekend at my grandmother's birthday. The whole extended family was there, and it was intense. I arrived at the restaurant to find almost everyone already seated. When I walked in, the room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. Super awkward. Aunt Holly immediately stood up and gave me a hug, which kind of broke the tension. As I took my seat, I noticed my parents looked different. Dad had lost weight, and both of them just looked smaller somehow. Vanessa was sitting across from me, glaring while keeping her kids super close, like I might corrupt them with my evil presence or something lol. Grandma, who's actually pretty sharp for 85, asked why everyone was acting strange. She had no idea about any of this drama. My Uncle Harry bluntly explained that I refused to help my parents and now they lost their house. Several relatives muttered disapprovingly while others looked uncomfortable. I just stayed silent, eating my food and watching everyone. Dad eventually made a comment about finding out who your real family is in times of need. I don't know what came over me, but I finally spoke up. I calmly asked if anyone at the table knew that I had slept in an unheated garage for 8 months during college. The table fell silent as I described the conditions in detail. Mom tried to interrupt, claiming it was only for a short time and not that bad. I pulled out my phone and passed around the photos I'd kept from that time. Yes, I still have them. My therapist says keeping them wasn't weird. It was documentation of trauma. You should have seen their faces as they looked at the pictures of the makeshift bed, the space heater, and the plastic storage bins that served as my dresser. Grandma started crying, saying she had no idea and would never have allowed it. Dad tried to defend their actions, but was shut down by the disapproving looks from everyone. Vanessa finally admitted she knew it was wrong, but didn't want to rock the boat, which is rich coming from someone who's been rocking the boat her entire life. I finally told everyone that I forgave them all. Not sure if that's 100% true, but it felt like the right thing to say. But that forgiveness didn't mean financial rescue or pretending it never happened. After that confrontation, several relatives who had previously criticized me approached me privately to apologize for judging without knowing the full story. My parents left the gathering early, clearly embarrassed by the public exposure. So where does that leave things now? I never wanted my parents to lose their house, but I don't regret maintaining my boundaries. I've decided to help them in non-financial ways. I review their budget sometimes, help my dad with job applications. He's trying to find part-time work to supplement their social security and occasionally bring them groceries. I'm still processing a lot of complex feelings about all this. Sometimes I feel guilty, sometimes angry, sometimes sad. But mostly, I feel like a weight has been lifted by finally standing up for myself after decades of being treated as less important than my sister. Some family relationships are slowly healing, while others might be permanently damaged. Vanessa and I probably won't ever have a real relationship, which is sad but also kind of a relief. I'm focusing on building better relationships with family members who actually respect me, like Aunt Holly, while maintaining careful boundaries with my parents. I want to thank everyone here for helping me see that I wasn't wrong to prioritize my own well-being. For most of my life, I genuinely believed I was being selfish or dramatic for feeling hurt by the favoritism. Reading all your comments helped me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. Edit. Thanks for all the awards and supportive comments. To answer some questions I'm seeing. 1. Yes, I'm still with Lauren. She's been amazing through all this and actually encouraged me to stand my ground. We've only been dating for like 4 months, so it's still new, but it's going really well. 2. For those asking about Vanessa's kids, they're fine. They're staying with her in the new apartment. Trevor, the ex, is apparently trying to be more involved now that Vanessa can't rely on my parents as much. 3. To everyone saying I should have just gone no contact with all of them, believe me, I considered it. I might still end up there with Vanessa, but I'm trying this limited contact approach with my parents for now. If it becomes too draining, I'll reevaluate. 4. Several people asked if I'm in therapy. Yes, I've been seeing the same therapist for about 3 years now. She's been incredibly helpful through all of this. Honestly, don't think I could have handled it without her support. 5. For those asking if my parents ever acknowledged the garage situation properly, not really. They've made vague apologies for mistakes in the past, but never specifically addressed it or shown real understanding of how it affected me. Baby steps, I guess.